come to Washington a lot more than I do now. About a decade ago, I decided my efforts were best spent elsewhere, working more broadly with the public, with educators globally. Not that this isn't productive, it just wasn't quite fitting into what my real passion is. And I got asked actually to be Assistant Secretary of Energy under Obama in the first term and met with Mr. Chu. Steve and I sit on a board together now. And we visited, but it was right when the shale revolution was taking off, and he wasn't that interested at that time in natural gas. I think that's changed some. But certainly, when you're going to be Secretary of Fossil Energy, natural gas was a big piece of it. And it just wasn't the right thing for me, personally. But it's good to be here today. And I want to talk about this political paradox. So we're going to start big. We'll start with the whole world. And ask ourselves, here we sit in arguably the center of the global impact, many would think and argue. And I promise I'm going to get your intentions by the time I'm done off these phones and computers. I promise you. But in the meantime, I'm watching you. So what are these big issues? What are the big issues we all face? So these are some of them. This is a dozen big global issues that the world... And I think we all agree on these. That's what I said this morning. I think we all agree that these are big challenges facing the world, but I'd like to ask you, look at that list and ask you, what's the one thing on there that affects everything else on the list? Around which, actually, we can't do those, and I'm biased, you're probably biased a little bit too, but it's energy. Energy underpins our ability to do all of these things. Lack of it impacts it negatively. So let's start with us, people. The population density map of the world. Red is really dense in terms of people. And there are places in the world that white. You know, I'm highlighting some of them. There just aren't many of us there for reasons that we'll talk about. Other places there are. Let's look at global income. This shows a range of global incomes, and there's the places we can't figure out global income because there's not many people. There are people there, but averages don't really mean much. Now, if we start coming across the bottom, that's $3 a day. That's severe poverty. And let's go up to $10 a day. And so the yellows and the reds on the map, $10 a day. I'll spend more than that today at Starbucks. I will. Okay, because I'm flying today and I have to have a lot of caffeine. $10 a day. Where are those places? Well, they're everywhere, but they're particularly concentrated in these areas under the yellow ovals. Okay? Now, I filmed some of these places in the last year. We went to Ethiopia, where I talked about this morning, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. We went to Colombia and brought for solar, a distributed renewable. Sorry. I will not be able to stand here. I promise. Yeah, I'll do a handheld if we could, if one works.
Well, that is a good point.
Good. So here we are in Colombia Indigenous Village. Vietnam, big challenges, but heading toward coal. This is Nepal, where they're cooking indoors with wood and dung. And finally, here in Kenya, and this is Kibera, which is the largest slum in Africa, outside of Nairobi. Over 1 million people living under the grid, if you will, without being able to afford much electricity. So keep going up to 12 grand, $1,000 a month. And that's the low end of the highest sector here. Let's call it level 4, like Hans Rosling does. $1,000 a month. It goes much higher than that. Where are those blue areas? Well, they're not spread around that far, are they? And they're there, but take a look kind of relative to some geography, just to get us thinking. Where are the blues and where are the yellows? We might think it's related to the population density. Here are the blue areas. Well, it's pretty dense and rich. And there are places where it's not that dense and rich. And here are the poor areas, pretty dense, and some less dense. So not really tightly tied to density of people. What might it be tied to? This is temperature of the Earth today. And you can see those areas where not many people live. It's hot, or it's really cold. We don't live there in those areas. Where's it wealthy? Just right. The greens and the blues. Goldilocks. It's just right. Okay. And where is it poor? Where it's hot. We don't live some places, but we live in a lot of those places. And there are those that are concerned, we blank out the wealth. It's interesting when you see, they're pinned, aren't they, between the tropics at Kepler and Cancer. 20 degrees north, 20 degrees south. 2 degrees warming will hurt the world's poor. 2 degrees C. It'll add about 10% to that high end of heat, and it will. Where it's already inhospitable, become even more inhospitable. Houston's inhospitable in the summer. Without what? Energy. So is Stockholm, Sweden. We've mentioned people from there today. In the winter, without what? Energy. You can't see. It's dark and it's cold. So let's think about this. Let's take a look at energy. Energy in the world, a composite satellite photo at night. Can we turn these lights off? I didn't warn you about it, but could we kill these lights up here just so we can see this screen a little bit better? That'd be great, thanks. So look at the tropics, north and south. You can see where nobody lives. It's dark. There's no electricity. Where's it rich? Where are the lights? The lights are on where it's wealthy. In fact, nocturnal luminosity, lights at night, versus GDP. Every country in the world, it's not a perfect correlation, but it's pretty strong. The more light you have at night, the wealthier you are. GDP. Where is it poor? Where it's dark. No energy. Yes, India has some, but it's weaker light. You can see that. Okay, so as we fade these out, energy warming hurts the world's poor, but energy helps them. Energy allows us to control our climate. It's what allows us to do what we do today. We are in this room comfortably because of that. Can't function without it in a modern society. So there's three kinds of people in the world. Those who are good at math and those who aren't. Which are the three are you. So here we go. This is some simple math. Here's the average Ethiopian, kilowatt hours on up through the average Kenyan, a couple countries we visited. Kilowatt hours might mean something to you. What's it really mean, energy poverty? Well, the average Ethiopian consumes 1/9 as much energy as my fridge. My fridge consumes 3 times more electricity than the average Kenyan in a year. I have 2 fridges. I'm a geologist. I drink beer. Got to have a beer fridge. That's energy poverty. How bad is it? 1 billion people today without electricity. The trends are good. Again, read Factfulness. Good trends going on in reduction of energy poverty, but still 1 billion. How many is 1 billion? Well, this is a map of the world's population. The colors are about 1 billion each. All the Western Hemisphere. Throw in South America and New Zealand, or Australia and New Zealand. It's about 1 billion people. Everybody you've ever seen in North and South America without electricity in the world today. We're not evenly distributed. And how about this cooking challenge? Sanakanchi in Nepal, who we spent quite a bit of time with, and her 5 kids. She's 35, has cataracts. Cooking inside with wood is like smoking 2 or 3 packs of cigarettes every day for you and your children. It kills over 3 million people a year, which is more than malaria and AIDS combined. Who knew? It's solvable right now. 2.6 billion people. 1/3 of the world is doing this today. The trends are better, but 1/3 of the world. If you look at severe poverty, that $3 a day bid across the bottom against the electrification rate of the country, is there a grid? Is there electricity at least in your area? I'm not saying you can afford it, but in your area. In South America, Latin America, mostly electrified, 10 to 20% severe poverty. The size of the circle proportional to population, Brazil being the largest. Here comes Asia, same population scale, less electrified, more severe poverty, and finally Africa. Now, correlation isn't causation, but there's a real strong relationship between lifting yourself from poverty and access to energy. Energy underpins that ability. It's a paradox. Energy won't end poverty, but you can't get out of poverty without energy. And that's one of the great paradoxes. Another way to look at this, I just finished this this morning, this graph, GDP per capita along the bottom. So that levels 1 through 4 against how much electricity you consume per capita. I've put about 15 countries or so. This is in 1990. Look in the lower left corner, China and India. No electricity consumption and essentially no GDP per person. Some severely wealthy people, to be sure, but on the average. And look where South Korea and the U.S. is in the upper right. Now let's fast forward to 2015 and watch the countries start to move. Moving to the right, the rich countries are doubling their GDP without increasing their energy consumption much. But then all of a sudden, here comes Saudi Arabia and South Korea, lots of energy, more wealth, Malaysia. But then Mexico and Ecuador and Brazil, not as much progress. China moves up and India barely. Isn't it interesting? Still a strong correlation, but look at the change in position. All move to the right, which is good, better GDP, energy consumption. But look at that trend. The big ones. India, China, South Korea, us, representing. You need energy. You need energy to get out of poverty. We made this film called Switch. Remarkably popular, still playing in thousands of campuses, 50 countries. We passed 15 million viewers. It puts us way up in the most watched films of all time. Not just documentaries, top 300 or 400. But it's remarkable how many still haven't seen it. I'll bet most of this room. Okay. But faculty and teachers are showing it every year. Energy was the star. We went to 11 countries, where's the energy best, and featured the pros and cons. Real nonpartisan, very objective. There it is. But as I've been speaking, I realized we left out half the world, essentially. The 4 billion people, not all in energy poverty, but live in this part of the graph. And what do they want to do? They want to do what we've done. They want to grow and industrialize, and they need energy to do it. Now, it'd be great if they could do it differently, if they could grow and industrialize without consuming as much energy, and we could get more efficient. We've been talking about density and efficiency today. Bring that consumption per person down and then in the aggregate down, and it's possible. There's technologies that are doing that now, but it's time to power the people. The economy, the environment, energy. I've been speaking about this for a couple decades now. The waltz of the 3 E's, I've called it all sorts of different things. There it sits, land, water, air, the atmosphere. Climate change is important, to be sure, but it's not the only environmental thing. The economy. What are we doing here? Poverty, competition, growth. And on the energy side, I just broke it fossil, nuclear, and renewable. Break that out a lot of different ways. It's complicated. Social, legal, political systems, it's complicated. They're very interactive. It engages everyone. We all have strong opinions. It's not easy space, that overlap space, that radical middle. Okay. It's not easy. But it's where the action is. It's where things could actually have a chance to get solved. And it takes critical thinking. You have to look at the pros and cons. You have to look around the issue and be willing to be wrong and adjust and adapt some of your thinking. If I color these differently, I made them blue and red for a reason. The Democrats kind of control the environmental conversation. Republicans like to control the economic conversation. And Republicans like fossil nuclear, Democrats like renewable. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it silly that we polarized ourselves like this and allowed it to continue? That conversation continues that way. Here's the map of the world's population again. That's the energy mix in the world today. And all my slides are color-coded. Green's oil, red's gas. We're going to look at some data in a fun way. Gray's coal, etc. It's 85% fossil fuels. Does it vary around the world? Yeah. Some. North America is a lot like the global mix. A little more gas. Europe, a little more coal. Russia, a lot of natural gas. We know that. South America has topography and rainfall, more blue. Hydro. Africa, more gray coal. The Middle East will shock you. Oil and gas. They're building a little nuclear, looking at some solar. Look at Southeast Asia. Look at the colors. Every color is a billion people. 1, 2, 3, 4 billion that get half their energy from coal. It's not electricity. That's energy, all energy from coal. I'm going to shrink these and grow these to be proportional to demand. Half the world gets half their energy from coal. That's more than the rest of the world combined times 3 in coal. Okay? Now that's the data. That's where we are today. And has it changed through time? Yeah, it's all gone up. We've gone up 365% since 65 in the amount of energy we consume. Now, coal and oil proportionally are lower than that growth rate. Natural gas and hydro are higher. Natural gas is a lot higher. The world is consuming more gas and replacing coal and oil with it. Mostly coal. What else has gone up? We have. Population. We're headed toward 11 billion. UN mid-range projection. Who consumes energy? We do. Correlation is causation. We consume energy. If you color code it by where, it turns out 80% of the world, you've seen the map now, live in Africa and Asia. 4 out of every 5 people. They consume less than half the world's energy. The rest of us, the 20%, consume more than half because we're wealthy. We are developed. It's lifted us into the modern world. Now, you will hear the world could be wind, water, and solar if it was just for political will. I'm not commenting on the politics, but I want to look at the physics and the economics. I modeled it out by when? I said by 2065. What if we were essentially wind, wave, and solar? That's one version. You could model this a lot of different ways. How's that look to you? And some are saying by 2040. How's that look to you? Is it even possible? Or is it a good idea? So this conversation, we have to ask ourselves, when we're saying it, is it doable? And what would be the impacts of it? Maybe it'll be 75% renewable. Maybe it'll be 50% renewable by 2065. Maybe 25% renewable. That'd be called business as usual. Why? Because oil, gas, and coal are just slightly declining, and all the new demand from industrialization and population growth will be made up by renewables and some nuclear. Okay? Business as usual. Is it? Let's look at it differently. That's the data. This is in million tons of oil equivalent. It doesn't matter. It could be in TCFs, exajoules, pick your favorite energy unit, kilocalories. Okay. Let's look at the exact same data as a percentage. There it is. A percentage of the energy mix. It turns out that business as usual, coal and oil are cut in half. Natural gas and nuclear double. Renewables go up 4-fold. Look at the left side, look at the right. Do they look the same? Not at all. That's going to be challenging. A 25% renewable world by 2065 is non-trivial. It's not business as usual. The right side of that in pure emissions terms is a lot lower than the left as a percentage of the mix. The actual units are still growing. So where does CO2 come from? We talk about it a lot, and we act like we know these boxes are scaled to the size. So here we are with our industrial uses and segregated. Transportation makes CO2. Heating and cooling makes CO2. Making power certainly does, and others. And then forestry and ag. It turns out forestry and ag make as much CO2 almost as all of power generation. But we tend to focus on these two, about half of it, power gen and transportation. What else makes it the videos you're streaming right now. Videos on demand, tube videos, porn, you add it all up, 300 million tons a year. And it's growing really fast. Every time you stream a video, a data center is whirring and bringing that to you. That's more CO2 than all the trains on the planet times 1.5. And it will soon pass other things, big things. Where's it coming from? Well, North America and Europe have been flat. We've been flat for 40 years in our CO2 emissions, and we're going down. Pat ourselves on the back. Where's it going up? Asia. A lot. And then the rest of the world, the poor part, not too much, because they don't have much energy. Bad Asia. I can't believe Asia makes all that CO2. Can you? What do we get from Asia? Everything. Everything. We have moved our manufacturing. We buy cheap products. We've moved everything there. So while we're bringing in stuff, what are we effectively exporting? Carbon dioxide to them. Because there's only one atmosphere in the world. One. If I'm putting it up in Asia, it's in the one atmosphere. If I make a unit of stuff in Asia, is it better or worse in terms of actual emissions than if I made that unit of stuff here? It's worse. The emissions controls are not the same. So while we're busy going to 100% zero emissions in our states and moving our stuff over there, what are we doing to the one atmosphere? We're increasing the CO2 emissions. It's not decreasing it. What are carbon taxes going to do? Read my piece in Scientific American just about a month or two ago. What are carbon taxes going to do? They're going to increase the price. Simple economics say increase price, decrease demand or supply, all good. No. That's not what happens with a carbon tax. It makes it more expensive, so we get it from over there. Okay? Because we're not going to have a single price on carbon in the world. Even with border taxes and other adjustments that a lot of my right friends think will happen. I disagree. So although carbon taxes feel good, and hell, we're in Washington, everybody likes a new tax. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on or what you pretend, you all like new taxes. And they don't get used to address the thing, typically, that's the problem. Look at nuclear waste. How's that going? Okay? So let's talk about electricity. Who consumes the most? China, then the US, then these other countries. Just actual total consumption of electricity per country. Who's number 3? Who's missing? Who are we missing here? It turns out it's the tech sector. Tech consumes more electricity than any nation on earth by a lot, and it will pass the United States. Just look around. Look at yourselves, okay? Everybody, the kids. This is my daughter's soccer game. There was a game going on. Oh yeah, we saw that goal. Who was playing? You know, pets are on them. Yo, this thing we call the cloud. Jeff Bezos, AWS. It's not a cloud. It's a massive set of interconnected demand centers that consume 3% of the world's electricity and growing. You know how, this is on their website, it's a snowmobile. You know how you move data from one center to another? Not on the cloud. It's too big. With trucks that are loaded with thumb drives, or the equivalent of. You load it up in a week or two and drive it for redundancy. Check it out. And this good old Bitcoin thing, 73 terawatt hours and growing. That's more than Austria, more CO2 emissions than Denmark from Bitcoin. All these digital things we're doing, they matter. It seems clean. It seems low emissions. It's not. Amazon with the cloud and its delivery systems. When you get 2 things delivered to your door, it's awesome. I needed a banana and some diapers. Great. 1 at a time delivery. Are you kidding? In terms of efficiency? By region, here we are. North America and Europe have been flat for 20 years in our electricity consumption. Who's going up? Asia. And it's not a surprise. They're growing in their massive population economies. In fact, the kink was when China really kicked off in the early 2000s, and again, the rest of the world, not too much. How's it made? Coal. Coal demand in the electric sector is continuing to grow. You saw the video. Burn coal, boil water, make steam, turn a turbine on a generator. Thermal power. Burn oil in some places still. Burn methane a lot more than used to be. In fact, a lot of the kink in demand is fossil thermal. We're growing our nuclear mostly in Asia. Growing our hydro mostly in Asia and Africa. And there's solar and there's wind and there's the geothermal part. That's it. It's where electricity comes from. We don't grow it. We don't mine it. We make the electrons. They don't come from a wall. And coal has been coming down in North America and Europe tremendously. We built our economies on coal, and now we're reducing. We become more wealthy. We're substituting other fuels. Not so Asia. Look at it. This is why it's 3x the rest of the world combined. And then the rest of the world, I'm laying it on there, not much coal anywhere else. Some don't have it, some aren't using it. That's 250% growth in coal for power gen since 1985. 250. How about on the methane side? It's 400% growth, and it's a lot more broadly distributed. It's not just Asia. Everyone is increasing their use of natural gas. 400%. If I look at coal and put natural gas on top of it at the same scale, you see the ratio of gas to coal has gone from 38 to 61%. This is a good trend. When you start replacing coal with natural gas, I'm talking about for CO2 emissions, you lower them. It's just math. Yes, methane still leaks. Yes, it's still CO2 emissions, but in terms of what can be done today, quickly and at scale, that works. It's been working in the United States. We have data to show that. Solar is growing more quickly than any form of electricity. It's exponential growth still, and it's broadly distributed. The costs have been coming down on the solar panels. It's true we're starting to get to the bottom of that cost curve. Not a lot more room to become cheaper on the panel side. Wind is growing exponentially. Remarkable growth in both of these. Now what's the challenge here? This is total electricity by source. I'm going to lay wind on top of it. You can see wind is growing more steeply. So when you hear renewable energy, solar and wind are growing more steeply than electricity demand, it's true. Their rate of growth is much steeper. But what does that miss? And they're getting cheaper, but what does it miss? Here's a little hint. What are we missing? We're missing a whale. We're missing scale, right? Scale. So let's scale these the same. Here we go. Remember, wind is in the graph. It's the light yellow up on top. In 15 years, we've built the best wind first. We go to the best resources for everything. Oil, gas, uranium, thorium, wind and solar. We build them first. Ask Texas. 15 years to get there. This is just electricity, and wind is only for electricity. Are we going to replace oil, gas, and coal with wind? 10 years? 20? 30? When? It doesn't even meet the increase in global demand for electricity. The increase. We've got to count. Okay? We have to be willing to count, because that will allow us to have some conversations. Can solar, wind, and batteries address climate change? How long do we have, according to the climate modelers and their models? 10 years, 15, 20, 30, 40, Will these address climate change? They can't. I'm not a climate denier. I'm an energy believer. Okay? It won't address climate change. It'll help, but we need other things that are bigger sooner. Well, maybe the electric car will do it. This is a Beamer, electric, and the license plate says electrons. Very proud of that, because they're charging it with diesel. Those are diesel generators making electricity. Right there at the site, we've lost the thread. Okay? Now, let's look at the actual EVs. They're growing exponentially. Over 2 million produced last year. Who made the most? China, more than the rest of the world combined. Where does China get its electricity? You've seen the data. Are the EVs in China green? It matters. It matters where you get your electrons when you charge your battery, what happens in the atmosphere that I care about. It matters. Okay? They're not. Nonetheless, Bloomberg, I have many forecasts, and I've made some awful ones myself. This is Bloomberg. Here's the actual growth. You've seen it now to 2 million. They say we're going to go to 60 million by 2040, and the pink color on top is other. That's the others who are going to be making electric vehicles. What's missing on this graph? Scale. Let's scale the actual to the graph. That's what we've done, and here's where we're headed. That's 60 million a year. The area under that curve is 600 million. It's about half the world's current vehicle fleet. The Tesla S has 7,200 batteries in it. 7,200 lithium-ion batteries to make up the battery pack. And they're awesome vehicles. If you haven't driven a fully electric vehicle, it's awesome. Not against EVs. I want to think about batteries. 600 million, let's just use 5,000 per car, is 3 trillion. And again, 3 trillion is a big number, not in terms of deficit, I guess. We're used to that. But yeah, again, for those of you who weren't here this morning, I'm going to count with you 1001, 1002, 1003. 96,000 years to get to 3 trillion. 96,000 years of seconds. Where are they going to come from? Nonetheless, this proud Tesla owner in Colorado, just taken a month ago, no oil. No tires. Colorado loves what? They love mining. They're going to go back proudly to mining because batteries come from mines. The metals and the materials that we use to make batteries and turbines and panels come from mines. I took this picture north of Butte this summer, and these are big. These are big things. Here's our Statue of Liberty. We'll put her to scale. Let's fly across the pit to the other wall and see something that we can recognize, a drilling rig and a big, big shovel. That's a 16-story building in the color bar, and here's a miner. Put the miner to scale. Walk him over to the rig. See, he's moving toward the rig. I had a hell of a lot of fun. I sat by Secretary Perry on the plane yesterday. We were both in row 8, coach class. Talking about fun things. We go back a long way. But anyway, this is big. These are big. Okay, and it's not just the impact of the whole. And I'm a geologist. I love mining. If we don't grow it, we mine it. But let's recognize what we're going to be doing as we make 3 trillion batteries. The lithium and cobalt demand today, that's just for your cell phones and a few other things that sometimes work and sometimes don't. Wait till we put them in cars from gigafactories. So it's a cool name. Elon Musk, man, I want him to name everything for me. A gigafactory. Are they renewable? Are the solar panels and the turbines and the batteries renewable? They're not. You have to mine them, make them, deploy them, recycle, refurbish, and then dispose them. And then you do it again. It's just a different way to collect energy. We're collecting oil and gas with a bunch of stuff right now, not renewable. Same thing for. So what's the impact of all this? Are solar and wind green and fossil fuel? That's the narrative. Your kids learn in school there's good, clean energy and bad, dirty energy. That's what's taught. I've seen the lesson plans. What does that mean? Well, I know that oil and gas and coal are dirty. First part of the question. Look. And it always has been. It's getting better in the rich countries. You got to make the stuff. You've got to drill and complete. You got to handle the water. We got some earthquakes down in Texas now. We put in TexNet. It's being handled well. Transportation, pipelines are pretty popular, right? Refining, petrochemicals, and you burn it. You burn it to do useful work, and 85% of the world's energy comes from this. It has a big impact. It scares people. We can't minimize this story. It scares people. They feel like they're in the running the bulls, and they're this person. The winner of the last photo taken contest, right there. I'm going to show you the runner-up. Here we go. Here's the clean stuff. Let's look at the good and clean energy. Oh, wait. You have to mine and process that? Got to make it? Turbines, panels, batteries. Have you been inside a solar manufacturing plant? Got to use a lot of land, transmission. We got to move it. Texas has 5 345 kV power lines that go from where the wind is to where we need it. And then you got to put it somewhere. Landfill disposal on a scale unprecedented. Is it clean? It's just different. Runner-up, last photo taken contest. Hey, look what I got. Let me start to wrap. Do policy intentions always result in desired outcomes? So here's Germany. Nuclear and natural gas were growing. Coal was coming down. Wind was growing steadily, and CO2 emissions were coming down till about a decade ago. And then something happened. Another documentary came out called Gasland, a very powerful one, not very factual, but very powerful. Scared people about hydraulic fracturing, hasn't proven to be, the impacts haven't happened, but a very powerful film. Fukushima Daiichi happened, and then Energiewende. I call it 2.0. Energy policy in Germany said we're going to slow the gas, no fracking, slow the nuclear, turns out grow the coal again, taking physical delivery from North America for a while from Powder River Basin. What happened? Wind went up more steeply. Look at the CO2 emissions. They were coming down. They have a wedge of positive CO2 as a result of good intended policy, well-intended policy. And the other thing that happened is the price went up. You put more intermittent energy in the whole mix, you have to back it up, as so well described this morning. It costs money to have redundant things around, batteries or plants waiting. They're more expensive. You mix that in. You see it in Texas too, in ERCOT. The price of gas spikes way up when the wind's not blowing in the summertime. And just last week, out comes the article. Thousands lose jobs as German wind crisis hits ERCOT. Welcome to scale. Sounds like the oil business. Intentions, outcomes. These folks had good intentions. They were putting in posts to keep people from parking next to the building. Okay. They kind of forgot where they parked. You in D.C. often forget where you park. You put in good regulations and policies that are well intended, but they don't always work. And you won't pull them out. You won't pull out the posts. Because it's political suicide to be a flip-flopper or to change or to think something different when it doesn't work. We got to get rid of that. We have to be able to do things and adapt and improve and change as the results come in. So we got energy. It underpins the economy. And guess what? It takes a healthy economy to invest in the environment. I've been very fortunate to be in 65 countries in the world, and the absolute worst environments on the planet are where it is poor. They simply can't afford to clean it up. There's no regulatory schemes or policies. The governments are unstable. This is This is Kibera, outside of Nairobi. There are some girls coming home from school here. That's just a river of garbage. The water, the soil, the local air, where it's poor, is awful. We've got to lift it up for the sake of the environment. So this energy transition, what is it? How can we address climate change and energy poverty? Well, natural gas replacing coal will start. And if we could capture the CO2 emissions from natural gas and put it back, store them, big topic, was 20 years ago, it's back, CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. It's expensive. Got a leading team that's been working on it 20 years at the Bureau. It's back. Nuclear, no emissions, dense, low footprint, manage the waste. Coal, and substituting coal with other things. Geothermal and hydro, if you have them, wonderful. We feature them a lot in Switch. Centralized wind, like we have in Texas and other places, it's great if you've got it. If you got the resource, you got to back it up. Distributed renewables. I mean, these people down in 1 billion people in the world, they don't have roads, they don't have lights, they don't have pipelines. The only way to get them electricity is DRE today. And then efficiency and conservation. We can use less and still do more. That's the list. And it's in order of impact. And I reserve the right to change my mind and improve. But that's in order of impact today at scale. Now take a look at it again. I'm going to gray out the first three. Natural gas, nuclear, and coal to address climate change and lift the world from poverty. How's that going to play, Republicans? Let me just ask you Republicans this. Democrat, your turn's coming. Climate change is happening. Humans are causing it. The impacts will be negative. Solar, wind, batteries, a global price on carbon, stricter environmental regulations, a ban on drilling on U.S. federal lands, and a ban on fracking will solve it. Take that back to your bosses. How would that play? I'm only going to change 2 words on this slide. The upper right one in yellow and the underlined one. Ready? Here we go. How will this play for Democrats? Those things won't solve it. Take that back to your bosses. These things are all happening, but those things won't solve it. How would that play? Let's do another one. Energy poverty impacts more than 2 billion people globally. Coal, oil, natural gas, this is for Democrats, and nuclear will be used to provide the majority of the energy required to allow nations to address it. Take that back. Coal, oil, natural gas, and nuclear. That's what addresses energy poverty. How's that going to play? I'm only going to change 2 words. Republicans and won't. Take it back. They won't be used to provide the... Do you see the problem? You see the paradox? The challenge is, to me, that the solutions don't line up with the politics of the passions. So here we sit with this climate, poverty, sustainability, political paradox. And we yell at each other. It's really impressive when you're out there in the country listening to it, by the way. And it happens at all scales. It happens in our schools. It happens in our local governments. It happens in federal governments. It happens in industry. It happens in NGOs. It's happening everywhere. So here we go with the radical middle. Are we going to just continue to do this? Are we going to pull ourselves apart? Is that really the solution in the U.S. and Western Europe? Is that really the solution? Are we going to grow the radical middle? Are we going to make it bigger? Are we going to engage? How many Democratic staff are here today in the room? How many Republican staff? Okay. So people can't see. It was 0 and a few. Okay. Reduce impacts of all forms of energy on all parts of the environment. They all have them. All forms of energy impact all forms of the environment. They're just different. End poverty, underpin the economy. Coal to gas, clean up fossils, nuclear, DRE, and efficiency. That's how we begin to address this. That's a sustainable transition. but it requires nonpartisan energy education and critical thinking. Or it won't work. That's just my opinion as a scientist and a voter. Is the global energy transition really from fossil fuels to something else? That's what it's being described as. Is it really a switch from a set of fuels to another set of fuels? Are we really going to do that? You've seen this before and you've seen these data. Let me scale them correctly. Now you not only know where the lights are on, you know why. Because they have energy. And if we truly leave 85% of that energy in the ground, that's what's left. Look at Russia, look at the Middle East, you can't see it, Africa, look at North America. Are we really going to do that? Let's dim the lights on the world by 86%. Here we go. It's really an awful thought to me. Okay? I'd rather lift them from poverty. In fact, watch Africa just as a thought experiment. Watch the continent of Africa as I light it up. Think about that for a second. The big things, education, healthcare, rights and empowerment of women, they go for the water, they cook indoors, migration, immigration. Fertility and birth rates are directly tied to wealth. These big issues begin to be addressed. Now, there are challenges with that much energy use, but the biggest opportunity is to invest in the environment. When you become more wealthy, you can clean it up. That's the little dance, the 3E waltz. And that changes the world. You know, it actually changes the world, which I think is what you all want to do. You know, I'm 60. I got kids from 30 to 19. They want to change the world. That's what you want to do. That changes the world. If your bosses won't get along, take somebody on the other outside the aisle out to lunch every single day and just start having conversations. It'll be remarkable what happens when you start to talk. It's not about fuels. It's about improving the human condition and minimizing the impacts of all forms of energy. That's the transition. That's what we do at Switch Energy. It's my night job. Check it out. Trying to inspire an energy-educated future. Go to switchon.org. And again, I put money in this, but we're having quite an impact. We're in high schools and colleges, which is hard to get extensively. Check out the database and what we're up to. Thanks for your attention today.
Well, that last message is a great one for us to take away. So thank you for everybody being here. Thank you for taking the time. Thanks for taking this and doing something with it. Because, you know, when Scott first started talking about energy, it was just mind-blowing and educational. But I think, you know, it's clear his focal point in his more recent talks is, I think, to be much more of a motivating factor for everyone in the room to go out and engage in a bipartisan fashion. So please do so. Thanks, everybody. Safe travels.